I could smell the axe swinging before I even walked into that glass-walled conference room. After 27 years of cleaning up other people's financial messes, you develop a sixth sense for these things. It's a specific smell, stale coffee, nervous sweat, and that expensive cologne that guys like Christopher Wells use to mask their incompetence. I'm Anthony Patterson, 53 years old, and I've been the senior financial operations manager at this company longer than some of these kids have been alive. Christopher, our new CFO, sat at the head of that mahogany table grinning like he'd just discovered fire. The guy's 31, has an MBA from Wharton, and thinks spreadsheets run themselves. "Take a seat, Tony," he said, not even looking up from his phone, probably checking crypto prices while the company burned around him. Before I tell you how I completely destroyed this man's career, let me set the scene. Christopher Wells, MBA golden boy whose understanding of real corporate finance was about as deep as a puddle. He wore suits that cost more than my first car and had that dead-eyed stare of someone who'd never actually solved a real problem. I sat down. The leather chair let out a tired sigh that matched my mood perfectly. "So Tony," Christopher finally looked at me with those shark eyes, "we've been looking at the numbers. The old way of doing things is heavy. We need agility. We need efficiency." I didn't blink, just stared at that pimple on his chin that he'd tried to cover with concealer. "Efficiency," I repeated, tasting the word like medicine. "We're pivoting," he said, flashing those perfect veneers, "moving financial operations to a third-party firm. Outsourcing, Tony. It's the future. Leaner, faster, cheaper." He slid a single piece of paper across the table. "Termination notice. Effective immediately. Pack your stuff, Tony. Security will escort you out in 20 minutes. That was the line. The moment the universe decided Christopher Wells needed to learn a very expensive lesson. I didn't scream, didn't throw anything. I just looked at that paper, then at him. He had absolutely no idea what he'd just done. See, Christopher was so busy playing golf with board members and ordering custom business cards, he'd missed one critical piece of mail. The IRS notification. A full forensic audit covering 7 years of operations. A $480 million inquiry scheduled for next Tuesday. I was the primary contact. I was the gatekeeper. I was the only person in this concrete box who knew where all the financial landmines were buried. "Is that all?" I asked. My voice was steady, flat. Christopher looked disappointed. He wanted drama, wanted the middle-aged guy to beg about his mortgage, his retirement fund. He wanted to feel powerful. "That's all," he waved dismissively. "Leave the laptop and badge." I stood up. My knees popped. Sounded like a gunshot in that quiet room. I smoothed my tie. I didn't mention the audit, didn't mention the encrypted files, didn't mention that his third-party firm was probably some kid with a laptop who couldn't tell a liability from a hole in the ground. "Good luck, Christopher," I said. It wasn't a wish, it was a prophecy. I walked out with the kind of calm that makes wild animals nervous. The office was buzzing, phones ringing, printers jamming, people pretending to work. I walked past my cubicle where some 25-year-old was already measuring for his motivational posters. I didn't pack much. My favorite coffee mug, world's best dad from my daughter, my old calculator that had survived 3 mergers and a spilled whiskey, and one red folder, not company data, just my personal notes, my insurance policy. Christopher watched from his glass office, arms crossed, looking like the king of a sinking ship. He thought he'd trimmed fat, didn't realize he'd just cut the brake lines on his own career. I took the elevator down. Security guard Ronald looked at my box. "Leaving early, Mr. Patterson?" "Retiring, Ronald," I said, effective immediately. I walked out to my Ford F-150, threw the box in the passenger seat, and sat there for a minute, gripping the steering wheel. The reality hit me then. 27 years of loyalty, and I was worried about making my mortgage payment next month. My retirement fund wasn't quite where I'd planned at 53. But I lit a cigarette anyway. Hadn't smoked in 15 years, but kept a pack for emergencies. This was definitely an emergency. Not for me. For them. Tuesday was 4 days away. I cranked the engine and drove home without looking back. The bridge wasn't just burning. I'd rigged it with dynamite and was holding the detonator. Here's what people don't understand about corporate finance. It's not just math. In my world, 2 + 2 equals whatever keeps the executives out of federal prison. For 27 years, I wasn't just tracking numbers. I was cleaning up rich people's mistakes. I was there during the 2008 crash when our previous CFO wanted to liquidate the pension fund to cover his gambling debts. I spent 72 hours straight restructuring debt so we didn't have to lay off 2,000 factory workers. What did I get? A coffee mug and a pat on the back. The irony was perfect. If Christopher had shown an ounce of respect, given me 2 weeks, a handshake, a transition period, I would have walked him through everything. I'm a professional. I take pride in my work. But pack your stuff and security escort, that's a declaration of war. And I don't fight with guns. I fight with compliance regulations. I fight with the crushing weight of federal bureaucracy. Then there was the CEO's divorce in 2015. Big Boss had been funneling company assets into shell companies to hide them from his wife's lawyers. Who found it? Me. Who fixed it before the SEC turned our headquarters into a crime scene? Me. I buried that mistake so deep you'd need sonar to find it. People like Christopher see the glossy annual report with stock photos of diverse people shaking hands. They don't see the duct tape and super glue holding everything together. They don't see me at 3 a.m., eyes bleeding from Excel spreadsheets, finding the one misplaced decimal that would have cost us $8 million in fines. They thought I was a relic. Tony with his paper files, Tony who won't use Slack. Yeah, I won't use Slack because I don't put evidence of felonies in searchable chat logs. I kept paper because paper can be shredded. Paper doesn't leave digital trails. I drove home with the windows down. My house sits on a 1/4 acre with a garden that's mostly thorny roses and aggressive shrubs. Hostile vegetation keeps people away. I poured myself bourbon and sat on the back porch. For 6 months, I'd been prepping for this audit. The IRS Forensic Division. These aren't friendly neighborhood tax helpers. These are sharks in cheap suits carrying briefcases full of subpoenas. They don't want explanations. They want blood. I had categorized every receipt, justified every write-off, cross-referenced every entry with bank statements. It was a masterpiece of bureaucratic armor, a maze only I could navigate, all encrypted on a secure server partition that required a physical RSA key to access. My key, currently sitting on my kitchen counter next to the bourbon bottle. Christopher had my laptop. He'd revoked my email before I reached the parking lot, but he hadn't asked for the keys. Probably didn't even know they existed. He thought everything lived in the cloud. I took a sip and watched a beetle struggle across the deck railing, trying to carry a crumb twice its size. "Drop it, buddy," I whispered. "It ain't worth it." I pulled out my personal phone, had Agent Miller's number saved, lead auditor with the personality of wet concrete and the ruthlessness of a honey badger. I had a draft email confirming Tuesday's meeting. I deleted it. Let them show up. Let them knock on empty office doors. Let Christopher try explaining efficiency to a federal agent who wants to know why our 2019 depreciation schedule doesn't match inventory logs. According to Barbara from payroll, she's my eyes and ears inside, about an hour after I left, the replacement team arrived. Picture this: a van full of consultants from some firm called Apex Solutions, kids in skinny suits with exposed ankles, wearing loafers that had never seen a factory floor. Christopher apparently stood on a chair, literally on a chair, announcing the dawn of a new era. He introduced the consultants as architects of our financial future. Barbara texted me that they couldn't build a ham sandwich, let alone navigate a federal audit. The lead consultant, some kid named Brian, asked for the transition folder, the roadmap, the cheat codes. Christopher walked to my empty desk, clean as a whistle, not a sticky note in sight. He opened drawers. Empty. Empty, empty. Well, not completely empty. I'd left one thing, a printout of that dog in burning room meme saying, "This is fine." Below it, I'd typed, "Good luck." Barbara said Christopher's face turned purple. He crumpled the paper and threw it down. "Doesn't matter," he shouted. "It's all on the server. Here's the thing about our IT guy, Steven. Steven lives in the basement server room, wears concert t-shirts from the 80s, and hates Christopher. Why? Because Christopher cut the IT budget by 40% last month to pay for new espresso machines in the executive lounge. When Christopher demanded access to my files, Steven probably took a slow sip of Mountain Dew and said, "Ticket submitted. 24 to 48-hour turnaround." But even if Steven cooperated, it wouldn't matter. The files they needed were in the Z drive, a partitioned, encrypted sector I'd set up 5 years ago. Military-grade security requiring a 24-character password and physical token key. The password was in my head. The token key was on my kitchen counter. The architects spent the afternoon staring at folders they couldn't open. Access denied. Contact administrator. They were locked out of the castle, and the dragon had flown away. I spent Friday night doing something I hadn't done in years. Relaxing. Made a real dinner. Watched a documentary about serial killers. My phone buzzed a few times. Calls from the office. Text from Christopher. Tony, we need the Z Drive password. Urgent. I looked at the text, took a bite of steak, and blocked the number. Then another text from an unknown number. Hi, Tony. Excited to pick up where you left off? Quick question about encryption protocols? Blocked. I wasn't ghosting them. I was exercising them. They wanted me gone. I was gone. I was a phantom. A whisper in the vent saying, "You shouldn't have done that." Saturday and Sunday passed like slow honey. I was in the garage by 7 a.m. Saturday working on my '67 Mustang. There's something therapeutic about rebuilding an engine. You have to be methodical, patient. Every piece has its place. My neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, leaned over the fence. "You look happy, Anthony. Finally killed your boss?" "Better," I said, wiping grease from my hands. "I killed my job." "About time," she cackled, lighting a cigarette longer than her arm. "You worked too hard. Gave you worry lines." Sunday night, the texts had stopped. They'd given up asking, probably assuming they could bluff through the audit. They didn't know about the risk assessment reports with big red flags and substantial liability warnings, all locked in the Z Drive. Monday was a bank holiday, but not for corporate America. I could feel their panic vibrating through the universe. They were probably printing general ledgers, staring at raw data, trying to piece together a narrative. Hey, why is there a $40,000 monthly payment to Environmental Solutions LLC for 3 years? I don't know. Ask Tony. Tony's gone. Well, figure it out. Spoiler alert. That payment was cleanup cost for the chemical spill we illegally dumped in 2018. Labeled as consulting to avoid EPA flags, I had documentation proving it was environmental remediation. Without that paperwork, it looks like embezzlement. Good luck explaining that to Agent Miller. I went to bed early Monday night, slept like a baby. Tuesday was coming, and hell was coming with it. I was on my second cup of coffee Tuesday morning, sitting at my kitchen island in jeans and a polo shirt. At 9 a.m. sharp, I looked at the microwave clock. "Showtime," I whispered. 20 miles away, black sedans were pulling into visitor spots at corporate headquarters. Doors opening. Men and women in gray suits stepping out, checking watches, adjusting glasses. They weren't carrying iPads. They were carrying heavy briefcases and accordion files. 9:05 a.m. My phone vibrated against the granite counter. Christopher's number. I let it ring. 9:07 a.m. Christopher again. Declined. 9:11 a.m. New number, 202 area code, Washington, D.C. Federal Government Exchange. I swiped green. Didn't say hello. This is Agent Miller with the Internal Revenue Service, attempting to reach Anthony Patterson, designated financial officer for Morrison Industries. I cleared my throat, put on my most confused voice. "This is Anthony. How can I help you?" "Mr. Patterson, we're currently in the lobby of your headquarters for the scheduled audit. We're told you no longer work for the company." "That's correct, Agent Miller. I was terminated Friday. Outsourced, I believe was the term. Currently enjoying retirement." Heavy silence. Then, terminated 3 business days before a federal audit. Poor timing, wasn't it? But our new CFO, Christopher, he's a visionary. Very efficient. I'm sure he can help you. Mr. Patterson, the gentleman currently stammering in front of me, claims he doesn't have encryption keys for requested files. Claims you have them. Oh goodness, no. I left all company property, but the encryption keys for the Z Drive, that's a secure partition. Couldn't just leave those lying around. Security violation. They're safely in my possession, awaiting proper handover protocol, which sadly never happened, since I was escorted out in 20 minutes. I see. Miller's voice had a predatory edge. So you're at home, and you have the keys. I do. And Christopher has no access, none whatsoever. Bless his heart. Thank you, Mr. Patterson. Keep your phone on. Click. I set the phone down, heart pounding with adrenaline. Not fear, anticipation. 9:15 a.m., Christopher's number. 9:16 a.m., office landline. 9:18 a.m. Christopher again. I put the phone on silent. The chaos at headquarters must have been biblical. Christopher sweating through his expensive suit, the architects frantically typing on keyboards connected to nothing. IRS agents sitting in that same conference room where I was fired, tapping pens on mahogany, watching the clock. Every minute they waited was a penalty. Every missing document was a fine. Every stuttered excuse was probable cause for deeper investigation. You know who hates surprises? CEOs. Specifically Kenneth Morrison, our CEO, a man who thinks he's a titan of industry but mostly just titans at shouting and delegating. He spends 90% of his time on his yacht or at conferences in Aspen. According to Barbara, who was texting updates like a war correspondent, Kenneth stormed into that conference room looking like a tomato about to explode. Agent Miller didn't appreciate waiting. After 30 minutes of Christopher sweating and consultants Googling how to audit, Miller demanded to see the signatory authority. That's Kenneth. He came down from his penthouse office, saw 4 federal agents, saw pale Christopher, saw an empty table where files should be. "What is the meaning of this?" Kenneth bellowed. "Mr. Morrison," Miller said, voice cutting through bluster. "We're here for the audit scheduled 5 months ago. Confirmation sent to your CFO last week." Kenneth turned to Christopher. "I thought Tony handled it." "Tony's gone," Christopher squeaked. "Where are the files?" "Encrypted," Miller answered. "Your CFO fired the only person with keys on Friday." The silence that followed could have shattered windows. Kenneth looked at Christopher, looked at the agents, looked at the empty chair where I used to sit. "Get him on the phone," Kenneth hissed. "He's not answering. Then go get him. I don't care if you have to drag him back here. I don't know where he lives." Of course he didn't. To Christopher, I was just an NPC that spawned at my desk at 8 a.m. and despawned at 6 p.m. Finally, Barbara stepped forward. "I know where he lives," she said quietly. Kenneth pointed at Christopher. "Go. Now. And don't come back without those keys." Agent Miller checked his watch. "Actually, I think we should come too. Chain of custody. If you're retrieving sensitive financial data from a terminated employee's residence, we need oversight." This was getting better. Not just Christopher coming to grovel. A full parade. Barbara texted, "Incoming. Christopher, Kenneth, and the feds. ETA 20 minutes. Good luck." I read the text, stood up, and walked to the bathroom mirror, fixed my hair, straightened my polo shirt. They were coming to my territory now. No glass walls, no corporate bylaws, just me, my bourbon, and the absolute truth. I went to the fridge, got out the good cheese, put the kettle on. Not for them, for me. I was going to enjoy this show with proper refreshments. My driveway isn't designed for convoys. It's meant for one truck, maybe a guest if they park on grass. So when the circus arrived, it was a spectacle. First came Christopher's BMW squealing around the corner like he was in Fast and Furious, except sadder. Then Kenneth's massive Mercedes taking up the entire street. Finally, the IRS sedan, parking legally and respectfully. I watched through blinds. Mrs. Henderson was already on her porch with binoculars, cigarette dangling. She gave me a thumbs up. Christopher got out first, looking like he'd been through a car wash without the car. Tie loose, hair messed, pit stains visible from 50 feet. Kenneth emerged red-faced, barking into his phone. The agents came last, cool as cucumbers. They huddled at my driveway's end, discussing strategy. Kenneth, pointing at my door, poking Christopher's chest. Christopher looked nauseous. Ding dong. I waited. Ding dong. Knock knock. Anthony, open up. It's Christopher. I took a sip of coffee, waited 10 seconds, then opened the door. Didn't unlock the screen door, just stood there framed by mesh. "Can I help you? You selling something?" "I have a no solicitor sign." "Anthony, cut it out," Kenneth barked, pushing past Christopher. "We need those keys now." The negotiation was about to begin. "Mr. Morrison," I said, clutching imaginary pearls. "Surprised to see you. Thought you were in Aspen." "The audit, Anthony," Christopher pleaded. "The agents are right here. We need the Z-Drive access." I looked past them to Agent Miller examining my rose bushes. He nodded. I nodded back. "The Z-Drive access," I mused. "Company property, right? I can't just hand that over. I'm not an employee. Need proper documentation. Receipt, liability waiver. Can't violate the Espionage Act by giving sensitive data to civilians." "I'm the CEO," Kenneth shouted. "I'm not a civilian." "Technically," I said, voice dropping, losing the confused act, "you're the subject of a federal investigation." And Christopher here is documented incompetent who fired the data custodian 3 days before D-Day. Kenneth stopped. He stared. He saw 27 years of disrespect, late nights, Anthony fix this and Anthony handle that. He saw the monster he'd created. "What do you want?" Kenneth asked quietly. "I don't want anything. I'm retired. Want to garden, drink coffee, get you off my porch." "Anthony, please," Christopher whispered. "They're going to fine us millions. They certainly are. And without my index files, without reconciliation logs, it's going to look like abstract art made of fraud. You know that $40,000 environmental solutions payment? Agent Miller's going to find that in an hour unless someone guides him to supporting documents." Christopher went white. Kenneth went purple. "You're blackmailing us?" "No," I smiled. "I'm consulting. Independent contractor, different tax bracket." Agent Miller walked up the steps. "Mr. Patterson, if you have the data, we need to secure it. However, we're under no obligation to assist in interpretation unless you're employed or subpoenaed." "Thank you, Agent," I said, looking at Kenneth. "You want the key?" "I'll give you the key. But keys just open doors. They don't tell you where bodies are buried. Only I know that. So here's the choice. I give you the key and you take chances with the feds, or you hire me back." Kenneth gritted teeth. "Fine. You're rehired. Same salary, benefits reinstated." I laughed. Harsh, barking. "Oh, honey, no. We're way past salary. We're in consulting fee territory now." The air was thick enough to cut. Birds stopped singing. Even Mrs. Henderson put down binoculars. "Consulting fees," Kenneth repeated like sour medicine. "How much?" I leaned against the door frame. "Standard rate for crisis management and forensic audit defense is $15,000 per hour. 6-hour minimum paid up front. Cashiers, check or wire transfer before I step off this porch." "That's $90,000. Christopher choked. "That's not for the work," I said. "It's for 27 years learning which buttons to push. For the disrespect. For pack your stuff. For efficiency. It's an idiot tax, Mr. Morrison, and you're in a high bracket." Agent Miller tried not to smile, checked his watch. "We need to return to the office, gentlemen. Clock's ticking." Kenneth looked at Miller, at Christopher, at me. Did the math. $90,000 versus $480 million audit plus fines plus jail time. "Fine," Kenneth spat, pulling out his phone. "Wire it." I waited for confirmation. There it was. Pending deposit, $90,000. "Give me 5 minutes to change clothes," I said. "And Christopher, don't touch my roses." I closed the door, leaned against it, heart hammering. I'd actually done it. I put on my best suit, grabbed the USB drive from the counter, picked up my world's best dad mug, walked out ready for war. We drove back in procession, luxury cars following my beat-up F-150. When we walked into the lobby, Jessica, the receptionist, gasped. I walked past with my head high, into the elevator, with CEO and CFO cowering in corners. The architects were still there, looking panicked. When they saw me, it was like Jesus walking on water. "Anthony!" one shouted. "Thank God, the lookups aren't working!" "Move," I said, pushing past. Walked to my old desk, set down my mug, plugged in the USB drive, inserted the encryption token. Beep. Access granted. Beautiful organized data filled the screens. I turned to Agent Miller. "Agent, files are unlocked. Summary of variances in folder Audit 2023. Shall we begin?" Miller sat down. "We shall." I turned to Christopher and Kenneth. "You two can leave. Adults are talking." The audit took 3 days. 3 days of me sitting in that conference room, walking Agent Miller through our financial labyrinth. I explained environmental payments, justified write-offs, showed paper trails proving the CEO's shell company had been dissolved and taxed appropriately. End of day 3, Agent Miller closed his folder. "Well, Mr. Patterson, everything seems in order. Documentation is exhaustive." "I try," I said. "We'll issue a no-change letter. No fines, no penalties." Christopher, hovering by the door like bad cologne, nearly collapsed. "Thank God." "See? Efficiency." Miller looked at Christopher. "Son, the only reason you're not being let out in handcuffs for gross negligence is because this man built bulletproof vests out of spreadsheets and wrapped you in one. You should thank him on your knees." Christopher opened his mouth, but Kenneth cut him off. Kenneth had been watching, seeing the difference between a disruptor and a professional. "Christopher," Kenneth said quietly, "pack your stuff." The room went silent. "What?" Christopher whispered. "You're fired. Leave the badge." Christopher left crying. It was ugly. I didn't watch. Too busy calculating my final invoice. Kenneth turned to me. "Anthony, come back. CFO position, triple your old salary." I looked at him, at the office, at the gray walls and fluorescent lights where I'd spent 27 years. "No," I said. Kenneth blinked. "Quadruple." "It's not about money, Kenneth. I'm done being the janitor for your mistakes. I'm a consultant now. You need me? You have my rate. $15,000 per hour." I unplugged my USB drive, picked up my mug. "See you around, Kenneth. Try not to commit any felonies." I walked out for the last time. That was 3 months ago. I didn't take another job. I took that $90,000, added it to my savings, bought a new fishing boat, started a consulting firm called The Fixer. I help small businesses survive audits, work 10 hours a week, charge a fortune. I heard Morrison Industries is struggling. The replacement architect screwed up payroll last month. Kenneth calls every week. I let it go to voicemail. Sometimes Tuesday mornings I sit on my deck with coffee, watching the world go by, thinking about Christopher. Last I heard, he's trying to become a cryptocurrency influencer on TikTok. I worked on my Mustang yesterday. Engine's purring like a kitten now. Mrs. Henderson asked if I missed the office. "Mrs. Henderson," I said, taking a sip of bourbon at 11 a.m. "I don't miss the circus, but I sure love watching the clowns fall down. That's how I turned a termination notice into a retirement fund and destroyed a CFO with a USB stick. Don't mess with the guy who knows the passwords. And never, ever ask a 27-year veteran to pack his stuff, because he might just take the whole operation with him." Thanks for listening, corporate warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're Christopher, then you're on your own.